On this very special episode of Needs More Grenadine, I, along with friend of the guild, Chandra, have a deep talk with none other than Rusty Venture himself, James Urbaniak, and discuss his career, the early years of Venture, live journal, and the lasting impact the show has had. I'm sure this doc-tale needs more grenadine.
Hi, Chan.
Hi, James.
Hi, Riley. How's it going?
Good. Pretty good.
Thanks for asking me to do this.
Yeah. For people who may not know who you are, want to introduce yourself?
I'm James Urbaniak. I'm an actor, and I'm the voice of Dr. Venture on the Adult Swim animated series, The Venture Brothers, which is why I'm on this podcast, is my understanding.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
why anyone listening to this would not know who I am, I'm not sure.
I don't know. You know, it's a niche podcast for a niche fandom.
It's the internet. People stumble over things sometimes.
Yeah.
That's true. Like, what is this thing, Venture Brothers? I'll listen
Yes.
to this podcast with this
Yes.
man named James Urbaniak.
Yes, how interesting.
He seems like an interesting fellow.
How you doing, James?
I'm good.
Good.
Good to be on the other side of this whole quarantine. Have you heard about this quarantine COVID thing that happened? You would follow the news,
No.
Chan?
What? I'm so confused. I've never heard of this before.
I know, because you just stay in your apartment anyway, so like you weren't aware of what was going on. Google it. But I'm well. I'm doing okay.
Was it a big
It was
deal?
big. It was a big news story. Yes.
Really?
But enough about that. We're not here to talk about that. But I'm doing well, all things considered. Yes. Thank you for asking.
You're welcome.
Glad to hear it. So I'm kind of curious because we've heard from Doc and Jackson at various points their side of how they got you to do Dr. Venture and how you got involved. Kind of wondering what your side of it, how you got involved with the Venture Brothers.
Well, my understanding is it was through a guy named Bob Sikoriak. He's a cartoonist, and I was his roommate in the early 90s. And so by living with Bob, I met a bunch of animation and cartoonist people. And so Jackson was an acquaintance. He was a friend of Bob's, and I met him, I guess, just a couple times. I didn't know him that well, but he knew me through Bob. And then he had also seen me in stuff, as an actor. So when he was developing the show, he just asked me to do it. I remember we were, Bob and I and Jackson were in a bar, and he had a little book with him that was like the original pitch book for the show. And it had sketches and drawings of the characters. It was pretty much the show. I remember that girl Hitler was more of a main character in that book, which she was basically a one-off joke in like one episode. But Dr. Venture was in there and all the basic characters. And we were at this bar, and Jackson just asked me if I'd do this pilot. And I think he had come to the bar with the intention of asking me this. And I said, of course. So that's my memory. Did they say something different?
I think that pretty much
my old roommate.
Yeah, pretty much tracks with what
Yes.
I have read.
And then at one point they were considering casting Bob Sikoriak as Dean. I remember this being discussed, but then Michael Sinterniklaas swept in, as he does, and just got all the attention, as he does. So but Bob has a fine career. Bob's accomplished many things, despite not being asked to be Dean Venture.
So when you had that initial meeting and when you were recording the pilot, did you have any idea it would last for, I guess the pilot had its 18th anniversary, and it still has a pretty strong fandom.
No, it's bizarre to me that it's been on that long. I was just happy to do a pilot. And then when I don't remember how much time went by, but probably at least a year for them to make the pilot and for it to air. And then after that, I don't actually recall when it got picked up, greenlit as it were, but a lot of time went by. I saw the pilot. I thought that was fun. And then a little more time went by, and Jackson, I guess, got in touch with me and said, hey, we're going to do a season. And then it was just like, terrific, a season. Fantastic. When you're an actor, you get used to things not working out. So when things do work out, that's a pleasant surprise. You kind of live in a weird default where you expect things not to work out, because otherwise it would be too much to take.
That makes sense.
Because you're always,
sense. I mean,
yeah.
Especially with Venture Brothers, was constantly on the chopping room floor. Like, is it going to be greenlit again? Is it not?
Yeah, there was that year-to-year thing. There was one year where we got renewed for 2 seasons. That felt really good. I thought, they have a lot of confidence in the show. But then I got to say, inevitably last year when I found out it was canceled, I thought, well, that's disappointing, but not surprising. We've been doing this for a very long time. And, things have to end sometime. But happily, they are doing this sort of series finale, sort of feature-length episode, which is very difficult because they have to tie up a lot. There's a lot of loose ends, and that they weren't necessarily planning to tie up in a single episode, albeit a longer one. But, we'll see. It'll be what it is.
Correct. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, they ended the last season dropping a massive bombshell.
Indeed. Many bombshells, including that Dr. Venture himself is a clone, which
yeah,
right.
is a whole ball of wax. There. Yeah, just toss that one out.
just for fun. Let's just toss that in there, sprinkle that in.
Yeah.
Because the one thing I've noticed being in the fandom, because I'm an OG fan.
Yes.
I was watching it when I should have not been. I was 11 or so.
Yeah. There's some adult content in there.
Just a little bit. Just a small amount. But there are now, it's getting into like the third wave of people like discovering the show. And
that's an amazing, that's, if you're on something that's been on that long, it is kind of amazing that there are literally generations who are like either grew up with it or are discovering it. My experience was always that it is and always was a cult show. Not everyone knows what it is, but I've said this before, but my experience has always been people either know it and love it unconditionally, or they've never heard of it. I've rarely met someone who says, yeah, I've seen it. It's all right. People are either intensely into it or they've never heard of it. Those tend to be the majority of the two of people who know it or don't know it.
Fascinating. Oh, go on.
No, I just less experience with people who are like, it's all right.
Yeah, my cousin tried to watch it because she's like, well, what is Chan into? Like, what is this show? And she caught Midlife Chrysalis, and she's like, yeah, no.
Well, yeah, no. I can see that as like someone who checks in with it once and is like, I don't know what this is, and it doesn't mean anything to me, which is totally fine.
Right.
But like, I don't know that any, like when I was a kid, you would watch every TV show because it was just on, and there were 3 networks or whatever, like in the 70s. So like, when I was a kid, I didn't really love Three's Company. Now there are people who did, but I just watched it because it was just like, it's Three's Company. You just watch it. So I'm not aware that there are people who just watch it and are kind of couldn't care less if it went off the air or not. It just passes the time. I guess that's what I mean. The people who get into it fall into
they
it.
Fall apart.
In a big way, which is a nice thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
that's what I've noticed that as well with it. It's a really, you discover it and then you fall in love with it
I was
if you make it
once
past season 1.
this is a few years ago now, like, but maybe 4 or 5 years ago, at least 5 years ago. Anyway, I was in a movie, and Al Pacino was in the movie, and I was in the makeup chair, and the makeup lady was doing my makeup, and we're just chatting. And she's like, "What have you done?" And she's asking about me. She didn't really know who I was, and I said, "Oh, I'm." And I came up. I was like, "Oh, I'm on this Adult Swim show, The Venture Brothers." She went, "Wait a minute. Who are you?" I said, "I'm Dr. Venture." And she like did this thing where she like turned around, like her body made like and I can't believe it gesture. Ah! She didn't know my name, but she knew the show. And then she said, "Listen to me. I do Al Pacino's makeup in this chair every day, and I am more starstruck meeting you." Which was really nice to hear. And that was a classic fan.
Oh
When
my
she
goodness,
realized I
that's
was
such
Dr. Venture, she was more excited to meet me than Michael Corleone. Which, hey, I'll take it. You know what I'm saying? I'll take it.
that's beautiful. I love that.
It was a
That is
great
the best
moment.
story.
And then I said to Al Pacino, "Ha ha. The makeup lady likes me better." No, I didn't. He was actually a very nice guy. That was a great experience. But anyway, yes. So there you go. People are
What
very
movie
into
was
it.
that? What movie
That was
was
that was an HBO movie about Jack Kevorkian, you know, the suicide doctor guy from the 80s.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's a good HBO movie directed by Barry Levinson, called You Don't Know Jack. And he plays Jack Kevorkian. It's one of his later sort of charactery roles where he, you know, looks different, has a different quality than his sort of default. He's great. And yeah, I play a journalist from Detroit who covers his legal trials and stuff. And I have a couple scenes with the great man. So that was an exciting gig. Yeah.
That's very cool. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, it's cool. He's Pacino. So like you walk in and he waves to you, you're like, "Pacino waved at me." Like everything takes on an epic quality. You know what I mean? It's like James Cagney walked in the room or something. He's that iconic, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
One morning I came in, I said, "Hey, Dr. K." We had chatted, we were friendly. I was just feeling jolly. I said, "Dr. K," coming into the set. And he gave me the finger gun. He was like, "Pow." "Oh, Pacino gave me the finger gun. My day is made." It's an awesome moment.
Fan-fucking-tastic.
Mm,
I love that so
yes.
much. Oh, a little history for anybody listening. Like, me and James have been friends for a very long time.
A very long time. Speaking of generations who came up with it,
Yes.
many years. This will tell you how long ago this was. We both had active live journals, and
Mhm.
I started a live journal and talked about the show, and you were one of the first group of people to. I was inspired because Jackson had one, and I thought, this is the very early. This is pre-Twitter and stuff, so this is like
Yeah.
the original social network. Live
Yeah,
journal. Where's Live Journal's movie, by the way?
right.
Someone get David Fincher on the phone. But I used to do these little posts, and there would be comments, and then there was a group of people who I really had a connection with. And then I think you must have been in Florida at the time, isn't that correct?
Yes. Yes.
And then eventually we met in New York and became good friends. It was a great experience. And I became friendly with a lot of people. Annie Wu, who actually ended up working on the show, was
Yes.
also like just a young fan. Was probably like in college or maybe high school when she started writing in, and then eventually moved to New York and worked on the show, which was
Right.
great.
No, I think she was in college at the
Yeah.
time, but
Yeah,
super good artist. She's
and a
really
very
good.
funny person. But
Yes.
there are certain people that I just had a real connection to in the comments. I read the comments, despite what they tell you
You're right.
not to do. But yeah, so we go back since very early. I forget when I started that. The show had been on for a couple seasons at least, but
No,
that was a long
I
time
think
ago.
I think it was probably about season 2 had come out.
That sounds
maybe.
right, because I started it in New York when I lived in New York, and I now live in LA, and I've lived here for about 15 years. So
Right. And
So
your
that
kids
goes.
were
My
your
kids were
kids were just
tiny.
being born. They were
Yes,
just being
yes.
born.
That's true. That's true. And my kids are in high school now, and I remember posting baby photos of them on the Live Journal. So that tells you how long ago it was. Very true.
Oh,
But yes, we have a long history, and then we met. We probably met at Dragon Con and Comic Con and things like that.
New York Comic Con.
New York Comic Con. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So I just wanted to throw that out there. We've had a nice friendship. It's been
We
great.
certainly have.
You had a thing called voucher anklets on Live Journal.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Well, yeah, my Live Journal was called Voucher Ankles, which was an in-joke. I had a friend. I was in a play that a friend of mine wrote, a guy named Will Eno, and he it was a one-man show. It was a character. And at one point, the character was just talking about words he liked. And I forget the exact line, but he's like, I just think about words like voucher and ankles. Just kind of a random joke, you know? And I always thought that was really funny. You know, this guy just reflecting on, he just likes the sound of the words beyond what they mean. He's not like into ankles per se. So I always thought that was really funny. So when I was trying to think of what to call my Live Journal, I'll just call it voucher ankles, the two words that my character liked in that play.
And all your fans are voucher anklets.
Yeah, so then the fans became voucher anklets. That's right. Because you'd have a Live Journal, and they wouldn't just be like at James Urbaniak. It would have Live Journals to have little names.
Yeah.
But then Twitter happened, and I basically switched operations to Twitter. And
right.
But the Live Journal
Russians
days were fun. Yeah, the voucher anklets, the good old voucher anklets. Those were good times. Yes, yes.
I miss it.
Dang it, Russia took over Live Journal.
Russia took it over, and hey, I mean,
what can you
Russia
say?
Russia took over Western theater, and look what happened there. We got the Method. The revolution didn't quite work out, but you know, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't with the Russians. Sometimes they mean hello, sometimes they mean goodbye. It's not exactly the force it was, Live Journal.
No, it's still there.
It's still there.
It's still there.
Voucher ankle. Those were done, yeah. Current mood. Russian.
So you started doing cameos during this pandemic.
Yeah, I did. I joined Cameo a couple months ago, and I got to say I enjoyed it. I did one earlier today. It's like going to Comic-Con and meeting, interacting with fans. The bulk of my cameo requests are obviously from Venture Brothers fans, and I have a rusty action figure. Those action figures that were made a few years ago.
Yeah.
You have one right there. There you go. So yeah, mine's over here, but I'm not going to get up at the moment. But I use that. I do a little puppetry with Dr. Venture. We have a good time there on the cameo. Happy birthday to you. You know the drill.
Yeah. People like I bought one. I bought one at one point. I think I got you to say trans rights. And then
there you go. Yeah, there you go. I do remember that. Yes.
And I was friends with the person who, I guess I am currently still friends with the person who you got who got you to do the silly goose thing.
Yes. Right. What was that? You silly.
You
It was
silly
a quote
goose.
from
You're so
something,
silly.
right?
It's like
Oh, it was that video.
It's
that
a vine. It's a really
video,
bad vine.
The viral vine where
Yeah.
the girl surprises the boy on Valentine's Day in a sexy outfit or something, and his reaction is, "You silly goose." It's funny.
It's really bad.
It's, hey, who no judgments. He's aware that he's on camera, so he's checking himself. He doesn't want to.
He doesn't want to say anything too.
Yeah, he doesn't say
too
anything,
X-rated.
blue. Yeah, exactly. There might be, children watching the internet, so he keeps it clean.
Silly goose.
You silly goose.
What's
That's what
your
I say.
weirdest?
What?
Oh, I was gonna say, what's your weirdest cameo? Like,
Well, today,
episode?
a woman said that she has a thing where she imagines Rusty as the captain of the HMS Terror, which I had to look this up, which was a 19th century battleship that later became an exploration ship, and then became icebound in the 1840s and vanished, and the crew died. And so I Googled the HMS Terror, and then I did a little puppet show with Rusty talking about his experiences as the captain of that ship. So there you go. A very specific, and then she later tweeted a thank you for what she, I think, called a very specific request. So sometimes it's a bit more generic, like it's my girlfriend's birthday or it's our anniversary. We'd love a happy birthday from Dr. Venture, but sometimes it's oddly specific, like this.
It doesn't get more specific than that.
But
No.
I'm very sympathetic to specific concepts. And then, yeah, sometimes there are things like that where someone's like, there's a semi-regular motif where people are amused to hear Rusty read something, a text that's not the Venture Brothers, like the Silly Goose video and things like that. They'll be, I would just love you to read this text. Sometimes it's like a meme, it's a dialogue from something else. And so I'll do it, there's been nothing I've objected to. You don't have to take them.
Yeah.
No one has said, like, could Rusty read the contents of Mein Kampf? I'd be like, no, he's not going to read that. But that hasn't happened. So I've had no moral objections to any requests. Rusty himself would probably love to do it because he'd get paid. He'd have no qualms about,
I'll take that money.
Yeah, I'll take that money, but not James Urbaniak, even though we have the same voice. It's sort of the same body type, although I have better hair. Ha
You do. You really do.
Thank you. Yes. Anyway.
There was a lot of requests for people for you to sing I'm Rusty, but I encourage all of those people to ask you on Cameo to do that.
Yes.
If they want to hear you.
Oh, thank you, Chan. Yeah. The famous Broadway musical. I have quoted that. I've quoted that. I've done a lot of singing, actually, because if they ask for Happy Birthday, I will sing it in Rusty's voice. And sometimes I just decide to sing for various reasons. There's a person whose name is the same name as a famous song, like Sarah from Fleetwood Mac or something. I'll start to sing that. You're just filling the content there, trying to come up with something. I try to give my all, frankly. So yes, James Urbaniak at Cameo. It's a steal, low rate.
A deal.
Deal and a steal and a meal. And a meal, metaphorically. And so thank you for plugging the Cameo, another platform.
Indeed. Got to make this coin no matter which.
I'm an actor. I was sitting around not doing a lot of work, so I was like, well, this will be fun, and it's a little. I bought a plant. So.
Yeah,
it's about the connection. It's about the connection, man.
Yeah, there was a point where at least someone had said, if he made a cameo, he would just get all of my money. Like I would just make these so stupid requests. I don't know if you've gotten all of their money, but you have that at least going.
Well, I've gotten some very interesting requests, so it's possible that I got that person's. If
All of their money.
yes, all their money. Oh, your meeting has been upgraded by the host, it says here. Very exciting.
I don't know. It
We've
told
been
me
upgraded. We're at a new level now that we're discussing
it
Cameo.
told me you're running out of you've upgraded from the 40-minute limit. Okay.
Yes, there you go. We can keep going.
We keep going.
Is there any projects you can talk about right now, James, that you're on?
Yeah, well, I have a writing partner named Bree Williams.
Oh yeah.
And a few years ago, I had a podcast, as you know, called Getting On with James Urbaniak. No relation to the TV show Getting On. It was titled before that TV show. But the podcast was little scripted playlets, like little short, little character things, little plays. And I started this thing with my friend Bree, and we started writing these little things together. And then we started writing more stuff. We did a series for Stitcher Premium a few years ago, and a scripted thing. Anyway, we have a new scripted podcast, which is just a single episode. It's like a feature. It's 90 minutes. It's a standalone scripted, produced story. It has actors and a score by a guy named Jonathan Dinerstein. And it's like a little audio movie, and it's called I Will Never Lie to You. And it's going to be on Audible sometime soon. We're working it out, but they picked it up, and so look for that. And then, yeah, that's going to happen. And then we have another podcast series, a scripted series that we want to, that we're not sure where that's going to be, but we want to get that produced, and hopefully that'll happen this year. So those are the things I'm most excited about. And then there's other little things going on. There's actually a movie that's going to be available, like on iTunes and stuff soon, called For Mad Men Only, which is not about the TV show Mad Men. I only have projects that sound like other TV shows. But For Mad Men Only is actually about Del Close. Do you know who Del Close was? He was like a big improv teacher. He taught at various places, including Second City. And he's kind of a legendary guy. He was an older guy. He started out in the 1950s, but he taught people like John Belushi and Tina Fey, like a lot of famous people who came through Chicago improv world through several generations. And he was a real character and an interesting person. So a woman named Heather Ross made a documentary about him. And For Mad Men Only was something that he said about like his classes or something, these are for mad men only, crazy people. And there are sort of recreations of, because he was a big storyteller, kind of a raconteur, and he told a lot of crazy stories about his life. So we have these sort of reenactments where I play a version of him telling these stories, and we see little moments from his life, in addition to actual footage of him. And there's a lot of talking heads, people talking about him. And so that's a really interesting movie. And if you're a fan of comedy, he's a very interesting figure who's actually very influential as a sort of behind the scenes figure in basically modern American comedy. He really had a huge influence, taught for decades and had a big influence on a lot of people, Del Close. So For Mad Men Only, I'm in that playing sort of a version of Del Close in this interesting movie that combines these sort of dramatic reenactments with actual footage and stuff. So that's a thing that's going to be available soon. I think it'll be on all the major platforms and things to rent.
Awesome.
And yeah, I think that's basically it. I'm just waiting for Jackson and Doc to tell me when we're going to record this Venture Brothers finale. I did see Jackson over the 4th of July weekend. I was invited to his home for a barbecue.
That's nice.
And I was like, hey, what's going on? And he was like, well, we're just trying to write it. it's complicated because there's a lot of stuff. And again, as I said, they didn't realize, they weren't given a heads up when the show wasn't renewed.
Right.
So they're like, okay, now we have to kind of cram all this stuff into one, long episode.
Right.
It's tricky, but they'll do something great because they never fail to disappoint.
I know.
Those
I'm always
boys.
amazed. Like, I come out of like a new episode, like, oh, I was not expecting half of this.
Yeah, being an actor on it, getting the scripts was always a real treat because every season I'd be like, holy cow, where are they going? But then the funny thing is I would read the scripts when I got them. Then like in a season I'd record, and you record over the period of a couple months, every couple of weeks you go in and do another episode. But when you record, you only record your part. The other actors aren't in the room. Jackson tends to read the other characters. Everyone records separately, then it's all edited together. So you're recording kind of incrementally. So then by the time it airs, which is like 1 or 2 years later, I've completely forgotten all the story elements. So I'm like a new viewer when I watch the show. I'm like, that's funny. Didn't see that coming, even though I had read and recorded it like 2 years ago, but it doesn't stick in my memory that way, And still there are so many threads on the show that I can't keep track of them. Once, I think at Dragon Con, Doc and I did a Venture Brothers trivia contest against the audience, and the audience won. Like we couldn't remember names, places, story elements, The fans had a much better grasp of these details than we did.
Sounds
true.
Probably about right.
Yeah. Really is like,
That tracks.
what was the name of the guy who blah blah? I'm like, Doc's like, I don't remember. I don't remember his name.
Was there anything that was really surprising about like a line or a story thread that you found particularly interesting?
Well, like Rilo said earlier, the stuff in the last season, there were a lot of big revelations.
Right.
Like my God, the whole thing with like Doc and the Monarch being brothers, and then the reveal of like what appears to be the actual mother, even though she's an offstage character. This actress. Adventurous, and all that kind of crazy family stuff was really, really fun because it's genuinely surprising and even kind of shocking. You're like, this is just all made up stuff, but it's the power of the storytelling. I'm like, holy shit. I just discovered this amazing thing about this completely fictional thing that two guys write. I can't believe it. So I'd say all the kind of family dynamics of the recent seasons have been very interesting to me. And not only who's related to whom, but also the growth of the characters was another thing that I thought was very powerful. The way that Hank and Dean, even though I won't say they've matured per se, but they've gotten older and their personalities have expanded somewhat. Let's put it that way. Even though, frankly, Dean seems to be the more mature one.
Right.
Hank has sort of gone into the clouds, metaphorically.
He's the bat.
He's the bat. Whereas Dean's in college, he's having sex. He's starting to experience the grown-up world. He's probably going to have to balance a checkbook soon, even though you don't have to do that anymore, just to get some sense of responsibility. That would be my pitch to Doc and Jackson. Have Dean balance a checkbook.
That's the whole movie right there.
Yeah, that's the whole movie. He's just learning how to do that, but it's what happens that day when he's going to get a bank account. Oh my. So yeah, they never fail to impress and surprise. That's for sure. Even me as Dr. Venture, I still am like surprised and delighted by what they come up with. And I mean, frankly, I cannot wait to read this series finale script, but I know that's going to probably be a while before I get that into my grubby little hands.
Right. They take their time with their scripts.
They do. They take their time and they want to get it right, and they don't, and that's part of the reason the show's fans are so intensely into it, because the show's working at a very high level, and they take it very seriously. That's true. 100%. Yeah. So for anyone listening to this podcast who's made it this far, who's never watched the show, what more do you need? I'm James Urbaniak.
So I have some listener questions.
Please.
From the truly devout.
Yeah, as long as they're not story elements that I don't know the answer to.
None of them seem to be. But
that's fine. I'll do my best if they are.
Sam wonders if you have a favorite line of dialogue from Venture, one that makes you laugh every time.
I'm very fond of a lot of the super old ones that people remember, like, that's my Daisy, that one. And of course, nobody gets the shrink ray is an old favorite. Yeah, sort of those classics. Those both come out in the same cadence. I either have a very limited vocal range, or I just like the ones that have that rhythm. Blah, da, blah, blah. So I would say those two are two that I think about frequently. Nobody gets the shrink ray. Yeah, that's very early. I think that's from the lawn sale or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, tag sale.
Those are the ones that I remember the most, are sort of those old early ones.
And yet they end up with the shrink ray.
Yeah, there you go. The shrink ray still figured in like the last season, if I recall.
Yeah, it was. It was still
it's still valid. It's still a valid ray. Better than the ray. Much better than the ray, which was all smoke and mirrors. The shrink ray was a real ray. The ray was bullshit.
Tom wants to know, do you have a favorite character you voice? One that makes you excited to record when you receive a script featuring them?
Well, I would say my answer would be that, of course, I'm basically two primary characters, Dr. Venture and Phantom Limb, then one adjacent character, which is Jonas Jr. And then I don't really do it anymore, but in the first couple seasons, they would have me do like little one-offs, like, Man on the Street and things like that. And then I think they stopped doing it because Chris thought they all sounded alike. They all sounded like Dr. Venture. Like, excuse me, officer, which way did he go? He went over there. He's like, you don't sound like a cop. But my answer would actually be, so I love doing those, but that's not an interesting answer. So I used to really enjoy doing the sort of one-offs. Like in Tag Sale, there's like some green slime with a voice. And I'm kind of doing like a Paul Lynde impression. I'm like, I'd like to report an accident. I forget what he said, but something like that.
Like to press charges.
Yeah, I'd like to press charges. And that's me doing Paul Lynde, the old comedy actor from the 70s, from like Hollywood Squares. So I used to like doing those one-offs, but I don't have as great a vocal range as Jackson Public. So I think eventually he was like, and now a green slime who kind of sounds like Dr. Venture. Then the funniest was when they did the Scooby-Doo parody. He had me do the Fred character, and then I watched it a year later, and it was Jackson or whatever his name is doing it, and pretty much sounding like Hank, I got to say. So I was like, hey, come on.
Yeah. You're right. He does sound a lot like Hank in that.
But Jackson actually has a very, among his many talents, he actually has an incredible range. And I think he only does voices because it's just convenient and it's money. But it so happens, and there's a tradition of going back to Walt Disney doing Mickey Mouse, which is a terrible voice, by the way. Hi, I'm a mouse. But there's a tradition of, it still happens a lot. They do it in Pixar, of animators doing voices just because they're around and it's easy. And you don't have to pay them extra. Usually. So see, I used to like doing those one-offs because I just got a kick out of them.
Harvey inquires wants to know, as an actor, what is it like stepping in and out of these roles? You know, Phantom Limb, David Bowie, Jonas Jr., Dr. Venture, over the
Oh, well,
span of the last 18 years? Like, does it take adjustment time when you begin to record, or is it like putting on an old pair of shoes that fit just right?
yeah, it is like putting on an old pair of shoes. It's funny, yeah, David Bowie, the Sovereign, I think my Bowie got better as the show went on. So that was the thing where the first versions, I think it's not as good as later. I kind of want to George Lucas it, go back and change the old version, re-record them, But so that was a case where I was like, oh, I actually want to try to make this better from season to season. Dr. Venture, yeah, it comes pretty easily. It's funny, in the pilot, there's a line where Dr. Venture is talking about something he discovered, and he says, they're robot bones. And I think almost every time I've been in the booth to record, Jackson says to me, they're robot bones, which is just our little way of like getting back into Dr. Venture. Like all the energy of Dr. Venture is packed into that little phrase. That's like my way in. I'm like, how does he talk again? Oh yeah, because basically I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again. On the first day of recording ever, the pilot, day one, the pilot, I walk in to the booth and I had some vague ideas about the voice. I'm like, he's Dr. Venture. He's like a wacky scientist, professor kind of guy. But I was sort of doing, you know how like on Futurama, Billy West does this kind of rubbery voice? So it's kind of like that, like a kind of rubbery, Dean, I was kind of talking like this. It was a little more cartoony. And we start recording. I start doing that. And Jackson said, yeah, a little less. That's good. Just a little less of that thing that you're doing. I'm like, okay. Dane, come over here. We're going to New York. Yeah, even a little less. Oh, okay. Dane, even less of that rubbery. And finally, I'm like, Dane, that's it. I was like, that's just my voice. And it was, but it's my voice with a different attitude. Because Chan, as you know, I'm a relatively chill.
Very chill.
I'm chatty, but I'm chill. But Dr. Venture is very, has an anger to his energy, a bitterness, a certain attack that's different than mine. Even though there are parallel qualities, and we certainly have the same basic pitch and cadence. So it's an attitude. It's a different attitude. It's me. And that's what acting is. You filter your own qualities through a different attitude. I just came up with that. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Could sell T-shirts.
Exactly. It's the
There you
attitude,
go.
stupid. Yes.
Avery would like to know if you have a favorite character not voiced by you on the Venture.
Oh. Well, let me give this some serious thought. I gotta say, I've always had a great fondness for 21. Doc Hammer's that kind of goofy, that kind of gooky, kind of creaky voice thing that he does. That kind of goofy dude. I've always had a particular fondness for that for some reason. Well, no, it's not. It's clear it's a charming character, and Doc does it perfectly. That's one of my top. But I mean, I love all the characters. I love Steve Tazzy, Dr. Orpheus. I mean, come on, that's one of the all-time. Because
everyone wants
that's one of the all-time greats. So. Yes.
Yeah.
Dr. Venture. You talk about knowing people. Chan, did you know that I met Steve Tazzy when we were both like 23 years old?
I didn't know that you met him by you were 23.
Yeah,
That's
in the 80s.
I knew you. Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
wow.
Like in the late 80s when we met in New York we were both young people in the downtown theater scene of the late 80s, and we met and then I think Jackson. I've been a lot of. He's He's an amazing actor, actually. He's a big theater actor in New York. He's done a ton of plays. He's been on Broadway. He's really remarkable. As you can tell from that voice, how that voice could fill
Oh,
a
yeah.
theater, you know.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But we met and became good friends. And then I think just through that kind of world where I was doing plays in New York around the time I met Jackson, I think he might have seen me and Stephen in a play together, or, you know, we were just part of, there was kind of a scene of live performance that we were both part of. So I think, and I remember, my memory is Jackson said to me, what would you think of Steve Rattazzi as Dr. Orpheus? He pitched that to me. And I, of course, said, my God, that's perfect. Call him right up, which I'm so glad he did. He's just one of those, Rattazzi is one of those performers who has always delighted me from the first time I saw him on stage when we were both babies in New York. He was killing it even then. He was always killing it. But so, yeah, he's another one. But there's a lot of talented people on that show. It was kind of fun when it started. Jackson was sort of interested in people who weren't necessarily traditional voice people. Like, I hadn't really done much voice work when I started doing the show. So I had recommended a lot of actors who became part of the show that I knew through the theater and stuff, you know, like Steve Rattazzi. Paul Bucock was also Jonas Sr. was another guy from the theater world that I was a part of. And Charles Parnell, who plays the vampire hunter, you know, there he was part of that scene. So there were a lot of people that I knew and recommended who came in. Mia Baron, who was like a utility woman in the early days, played Molotov Cocktease. She was I had been a play with her and recommended her to him. So I was kind of a de facto casting director in the early days, kind of helping assemble performers. Because Jackson seemed to like drawing from like theater performers, which is interesting because they tend to be in different worlds. You have your voice actors and you have your theater actors, and there's not so much overlap. So that was kind of interesting. A lot of the pool in the early days, at least, was drawn from like sort of New York theater people. You know, Jackson was living in New York at the time. The show was based in New York, even though it didn't take place in New York till years later.
Right. It's so interesting because it really does give it a different type of character against other cartoons that definitely like pull from the same people over and over again, like Billy West and Tress McNeely. And
don't get me wrong, those people are brilliant.
Oh, no.
I love voice acting.
I love them.
I'm not saying that theater people are better. It was just a different pool, and it was fun.
I think it's a different flavor. That's all. Like that's.
I guess so. And I guess Jackson just responded to those sort of actors of that background. Like, I don't know that Steve Rattazzi had done any voice work before the show either, you know, or Paul Bucock for that matter. But they both have wonderful voices. They just were sort of in a different world. So, yeah, that was kind of fun. He pulled a lot of people into the show who were still part of it, where it was really their first voice work. It was certainly my first big voice gig. I had done like a couple little things, like some commercial stuff, and you know, but I hadn't really done animation. So yeah, it was a great opportunity.
Apologies for my beeping here.
That's okay. It's the world. We live in a world of beeps and dings.
Absolutely.
It's all the time. No need to apologize.
Michael is curious what project of your vast career has stuck with you the most?
Stuck with me the most? Well, that's obviously the Venture Brothers, because that's been the longest running gig that I've had. For any actor to say I've been on this show for fucking 18 years is insane, even though there's only been 7 seasons, but there's such a long turnaround since the pilot. You know, it's incredible. And that show has brought so much to me. It's just been such a blessing, such an incredible thing. Friendships, obviously, and just everything. Creatively, it's been so much fun. But I've been lucky enough to like regularly work on things that I find very creatively exciting and that I still carry with me. One example, I'll tell you, going back to, I'm just talking about my days working in theater downtown. There's a a very well-known, in New York, he's well-known. There's a very well-known guy in New York theater named Richard Foreman. He's a director. He's a writer-director. He writes and directs his own plays. And for lack of a better word, he's avant-garde. His stuff is experimental. It's really, really good and really smart and really compelling. And I had seen, this guy's very famous in like the New York theater world. And I had seen one of his plays when I first came to New York and thought it was incredible. I don't even know how to describe it if you haven't seen it, but it's just a lot of elements that are very, very exciting, but aren't like traditional plays where someone walks in and turns on a light. They sort of take place in sort of imagined worlds. The characters wear strange clothing, you know, but they there's a real sense of a strange world that you're watching that seems very real. It has its own rules, is the way I can put it. Like an abstract painting, you know what I mean? Only on stage with people moving around and saying things. The way an abstract painting has like a life and something specific to it, and you kind of bring your own take on what that is, but you can tell that something's happening there. Anyway, that's what I went to see, and it kind of blew me away. And then very luckily, years later, after being in New York for a while, I got to be in one of those plays, like about 8 years after I'd seen my first one. And even though it was very abstract and, you know, kind of crazy, he's so specific in his approach to the art that it makes you, when you're on stage and in rehearsal, you have to question everything you're doing and really give it a lot of thought. And that's just being specific. And as we know, being specific is what good art is about. So it's a very long-winded way of saying my experience doing Richard Foreman's play in 1996 had such a profound effect on me as an actor that I still bring things I learned from that experience to more like, you know, TV projects that are more realistic or whatever, you know? So that's one of the biggest ones that really, because the question was something like, what has stuck with me, or, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's something where I still kind of carry what I experienced in that play and still sort of activate it. You know what I mean? So that's one. And then another, I'll say a last one would be Hal Hartley, who's an independent film director based in New York, who kind of gave me my start in terms of making money at this. He like put me in a movie called Henry Fool that we shot in 97. It came out in 98. That's a great movie. And he's a great artist who kind of goes his own way, makes his own very personal movies. And that was another thing where he also has very specific ideas about acting in his films. There's a kind of stylized quality of the performing, but it's another thing that you can, as an actor, you can kind of take elements of and transfer to things that are less stylized. And he also literally like put me in a movie, which kind of really helped me get my start as a working actor. I had been an actor in New York doing theater downtown, but not really making money. I always had day jobs. So he's a very profound person for me in my creative life, because he was the first guy to kind of really kind of get me started on the path of not having to work a day job and just do this, which, you know, has still been the case. So there you go. Those are very profound sort of influences on me and people who, can I throw in one last one, which is my mentor, Karen Coonrod. When I started in the theater in New York, a woman named Karen Coonrod and I, who was a director, really talented theater director. She still directs all over the world. We formed a theater company. That's when I moved to New York. I met Steve Rattazzi, and she taught me a lot about theater and acting. And so my days with that theater company are also something that I still carry with me, you know. And there's something exciting about, you know, the early days when you don't quite know what you're doing, you're still figuring it out. And sometimes when you get a little more, when you get older and more technically accomplished, it's good to remember that time when you just had instinct, but not a lot of technique, because there's something very good about that energy too. And certainly I can say for myself, there have been times, I'm not proud of it, where I have sort of coasted on my technique, but haven't really dug deep and haven't really, you know, had the excitement that I had when I was younger. So it's good to remind yourself of that kind of energy you have when you're, whatever your art is, acting, writing, visual art, whatever, kind of get in touch with that sort of younger part that just wanted to do this, but didn't really know how to do it. That's still sort of an important energy to tap, even as you get accomplished and technical as you get older, which you should do. I'm very pro technique, but yeah. But they're always there. It's funny because the Venture Brothers I've always sort of had that feeling like, oh, this is exciting and fresh and new. It's really been one of the all-time great experiences working on that show. And Jackson and Doc are genuine artists. They really are created something personal. It's everything you want. It's personal. And because it's personal, that's why people relate to it. And that's why it's funny. They don't do the kind of writing where they're like, this is what people think is funny, so we'll do this. They don't pander to audiences. They just do something they respond to. And there's enough people who respond to that as well. But it's always been very personal, My God, it's practically a catalog of their weird little obsessions, especially Doc Hammer, with all the weird references he puts into his scripts,
Mm-hmm.
Or
sometimes there would be cases where I would have to, I'm a fairly erudite aging Gen X hipster. Yeah. So I would get a lot of the musical references, but sometimes I would have to say, what is this? I don't know who this is. I don't know who you're, when they'd have some little reference for someone in the back of the room to go, oh my God, I can't believe they made that reference. So they'd have to explain it to me sometimes, who I have a rather encyclopedic brain of like cultural detritus, however you say that. But even I would have to ask them sometimes what they were referring to.
And finally, Joseph asks the big question.
Yes. Will you marry me? Too late. Too late, but I can be friends. But a cameo,
submit that.
But I can offer a caveat. No, go on. I'm sorry. This is no time for levity. What's the big question?
The big question is, if given the opportunity beyond this final special to voice Dr. Venture again, would you do it?
Well, I had never thought of the possibility that I would hear that this special was in production and Dr. Venture would not be in it. That possibility had never occurred to me. However, as I said earlier, you can never expect anything in show business. So if I am given the opportunity to be in the Venture Brothers finale, to reprise the character of Dr. Venture in this very special episode, yes, I will be there with bells on. I will happily do it, but I will leave it to the fates and to Messrs. Publican and Jax and Hammer to see if Dr. Venture does indeed make the cut. God, let's keep our fingers crossed, gang. Let's hope Dr. Venture's in the finale. But you never know. I've been disappointed before in show business. That's all I'm saying. I'm not expecting it, but anything's possible. I've had directors tell me I'm in the movie and then I never hear anything, This is how it works. No. But come on. Dr. Venture will be in the show. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding here.
Venture Brothers was always Dr. Venture's show.
The trouble with saying, yes, one of the problems with the internet is if I make a joke like, I hope I'm in it, then people are like, James Urbaniak hopes he's in the finale. It's like, I'm just making a joke. It's the Venture Brothers. Of course I'm going to be in it. Now watch, I won't be. And then that'll be my comeuppance.
Of course he'll be in it.
I'm sorry to have some fun with the question, but yes, if I'm in it, I will happily do it. Yes, that's my answer.
And if asked again, would you do it? If, like, say, the gods decide, okay, this special was really good, right? We need to give them another season. Would you sign on to do it?
Without question. Oh, please. Of course. It's funny that I won't mention names, but there's an actress who was on a very popular show. And when you're on a popular show, you get opportunities to do other things. And she had tweeted, this is a couple years ago, she had tweeted an elliptical tweet where she's right, like the week they said they were renewing the show for another season. It had already been on for a while, a few seasons. And she wrote, "I'm so disappointed." And everyone was thinking, okay, she's saying she's upset that her show is renewed because now she's tied down to that show and can't do other movies and have other opportunities. And hey, that's her reality, and I'm not judging it, but I'm saying that is not mine. I will happily do Venture Brothers for as long as I can, which in this case looks like one last recording session for a feature-length finale. And that's what I have to say about that.
So where can people find you online?
At James Urbaniak on Twitter. And of course, the archives of Voucher Ankles are still gathering dust in some corner of the internet, assuming the Russians haven't erased it. And that's basically it. And then the site that used to carry my Getting On with James Urbaniak, the podcast, the scripted podcast, dissolved, but you can still find, it's still hosted other places. So you can find Getting On with James Urbaniak episodes. There's like the Libsyn site that just hosts it. And I think it's also on, you can find it on the internet. And again, look for this audio movie thing that I created, that I also act in, called I Will Never Lie to You. It's a story which will be on Audible sometime soon. And by the way, that's a story set in the 1970s. And it stars me and some wonderful actors, including Ray Seahorn, who from Better Call Saul. So look for that. She's an old buddy too.
So
that's it. That's my online footprint.
And then of course,
my digital footprint.
Costs you money to say stuff on Cameo.
On Cameo, yes.
Yes, and you can find me on Cameo, where I will recite whatever you want. Wish you a happy birthday, happy anniversary. No gender reveals; those are too dangerous. But anything else, I'm not going to set off a firework and announce the gender of your newborn. But pretty much anything else, gang. Yes. Well, yeah, that's it. Thank you for having me.
Before you go, can I get a Go
Please.
Team Venture?
Go Team Venture. No, it's a little phlegmy there. Let me try that again. Go Team Venture. There we go. That was good, Dr. V. I still got it.
You still got it, James.
Still got
Thank
it.
you so much for being a part of this.
Much.
Thank you.